right. Well, welcome to Celluloid Dreams, the psychology of film, aka CD Top Off. Um, I'm Mike, and this is Matt as well on the other side. Matt, say hello.
Hello. Greetings, everyone.
Yep, this is the flagship episode. So, this is how all others will be compared, hopefully favorably, as we go. All right, so what are we doing here? There's plenty of content online about movies, people stating their views and analyzing and so forth. So what's our point here? Psychology film should kind of say it, but I mean the view is that there's not all objectivity involved when it comes to analyzing film. It's a soft science. So where do people base their analysis from? Probably some personal experience, probably some training, some exposure to content, whether it be the IMDb list or the Sight and Sound greatest films ever made list, where people have to come up with, I don't know how they do it, 10 films that are their favorites of all time. I mean, how does one do that? So before we get to the end of this episode, though, we will provide our list of our favorite 30 films to be a little bit more inclusive. And you can wait for that. But first, we're going to introduce ourselves. So, Matt, go ahead and say some things about yourself.
Well, my name's Matt. I grew up in Southern California. I'm a lover of film. I'm a lover of going to the cinema, which is something I try to do at least once, if not twice a month. And I spent 2 years out of high school at UC San Diego, where I studied primarily photography and theater, as well as general education. I then transferred to Chapman University in Orange, California, where I studied film production and ended up getting my BFA in film TV production from there. Actually, through connections I made there, I had a brief stint at the Stan Winston studio on the first Jurassic Park film, and actually took a little time off school in order to do that because it was a great opportunity and a great experience. Went back to school, got my degree, and then connections from Stan Winston studio led me to a job at Digital Domain, the first incarnation of Digital Domain when they were in Venice Beach. And I worked there as a stage assistant for a period of time. At that time, they were doing post production effect shots on Interview with the Vampire and True Lies. Just as I learned, the business, especially in the effects end of things, is inconsistent. You work, the job ends, and typically you're laid off and have to search for another job. So I ended up finding another way to make a living that had a more consistent pay, but my love of movies didn't diminish at all. And you know, fortunately, I live in an area with plenty of movie theaters, so I still get my trip to the theater. And I have friends like Michael who we often talk about movies. I think that's probably the biggest subject we discuss. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. And
Well, that's
Mike, how about you?
your professional and educational background, but who
Yeah.
are you prior to your
Oh
exposure
gosh, who
to
am I?
film?
You know,
Yes,
I had parents that were very creative, and my mom was a teacher. At some point, she taught art history, and so my parents would often take my brother and I to movies, beginning when we were kids. And I think one of the first experiences I remember in the cinema was the first Star Wars film, and was just blown away by the opening shot, like most everybody was, and
indeed.
realized at that time that the experience of going to cinema can be emotional and energizing. And in years afterwards, I remember my father taking my brother and I to see Superman the movie in 1978, another film that just blew my socks off, and I really did believe a man could fly. The tagline was correct. We did believe Chris Reeves could fly. And I know not long after that, like in the early 80s, my dad took my brother and I to see The Right Stuff. And my father was a former military pilot who became a airline pilot. And so that was a great experience being there, seeing my father's reaction to things that were going on in the film with the characters, and knowing that as a Marine, he could relate to some of what was going on. It was entertaining him from his life's experience. And then, of course, it was a thrilling movie with a lot of great actors and great visual effects. And it was just a thrilling experience. And then as you As I got older, I think I lean more towards the darker side of things. It's not all Star Wars. It's not all Superman. You know, I love the work of filmmakers such as David Fincher and David Cronenberg, and I love how cinema can explore the dark elements of life. And go ahead.
I mean, our psychology, the dreams we have are not all bright and lively. Some of them are, uh, there interferes in our heads that we need to process out. And, filmmakers like the other David Lynch, definitely probes the dream world. A lot of his films have dream logic as opposed to actual logic. So that's, again, where if you take this exploration of the psychology of film all the way, it goes that far into the breakdown of reality, and that's what happens in Lynch's work. So, okay, my background: I grew up in Indiana, far away from Hollywood, much farther than you. Um, um, my, I guess, awakening of the power of film was also Star Wars. We are, Gen X, and what can we say? That it's a pivotal film for anybody who loves film and is in Gen X. Star Wars is going to be that event. So what can you say? You can't help that. So whether you hate it or love it now in the form that it's in, or just continue to observe it going, okay, that's fine. Or in the case of Andor, like, wow, I didn't know that you could do that in Star Wars. So it's that's where I came from, was kind of a rural slash suburban community, kind of a foot in both sides, a kind of cosmopolitan, but yet, everybody I was around was pretty much um, either in farming or factory, or a few business people, whether it be banking or Eli Lilly, which was the pharmaceutical industry powerhouse that's in Indianapolis, which was near me. That was my community, was that interesting mix. And so I kind of knew I was going to go out of that community at some point, which I ended up doing when I came to law school at UCLA. I did study psychology in undergrad, so I knew I was interested in um, that study, with the idea that it could apply to when I work in law. But the area of law was supposed to be entertainment law, which I actually did try to pursue to a certain degree at some point, but I actually ended up working more outside of the law aspect and did a little bit of set work and then development. So I was reading scripts and books for films. I guess the most high profile job I would have had was being a reader for Created By, which is Vince Gerardis's company. Vince Gerardis, a lot of people may, if they observe the credits of Game of Thrones, is the executive producer. He represents George R. R. Martin. So anyway, so again, just like you, didn't end up working full time in film from there, but um, had my hand in writing some screenplays, gave it a shot. Uh, so it just didn't really turn out that way. And now I'm doing something else, but still, like you said, developing the education on my own. Learned a lot on my own. I did take a couple of film classes in college. I took entertainment law in law school, and then otherwise self-taught since then. So anyway, one other thing that I like to share is the Midwest values that I kind of came with my upbringing. Naturally, there's a lot of religious upbringing. My mom's side of the family, in particular, my grandmother on the other side was Catholic. So I respond a lot to spiritual and religious themes, mythological themes as well. You and I just discussed before we started here about the new Avatar film. There's a lot of mythological storytelling and references even to religious things, including Christianity. The pillar of fire toward the end of the film is very much like the Ten Commandments. I mean, he's definitely tapping into, some of those things. And whenever that's in a movie, I catch it. Because of my upbringing, I'm very trained to that. Maybe you can talk about your spiritual religious upbringing as well.
My father was raised Southern Baptist, and his family was, they weren't, and I can't say necessarily that religion was the whole reason, but my father's family was very introverted. They internalized a lot. I don't think they communicated effectively amongst themselves. My mom's family, she was raised Episcopalian, and her family was quite opposite. They discussed everything. This was in Ohio. My father was born in Tennessee. He moved to Ohio as a child. My father also had a farm background. Um, my dad's father, my grandfather on my father's side, was a farmhand, basically, for an owner of a farm. So they were rather poor. They were all born at home. And then after my dad and his brother and their 2 sisters were born, the family eventually relocated to Ohio. So, getting back to my mom's family, they were much more of a verbal family and didn't hesitate to communicate their differences with each other. And so, as my brother and I were being raised here in Southern California, they would take my brother and I to church, typically Episcopalian churches. One we went to for years was in Laguna Beach, and we would certainly discuss religion and religious themes at home. For high school, my parents decided it was best, actually, as 8th grade through high school, my parents decided best that I'd be transferred to a private school, an Episcopalian private school in Orange County. And, we'd go to church twice a week for that. And, my mom's still religious. My father was as well. He's passed. But I think my mom would prefer that I make religion a bigger part of my life. I've chosen not to make it a large part of my life. In fact, the only 2 times I go to church primarily are for weddings and for funerals. And, I admire a lot of what is believed in religions of different faiths, and I respect people's views, but it's not, religion is not something I use in my life. But I've had the experience with it as a younger person, and, I don't need I just don't feel it needs to be part of my life as an adult.
Right, and that's fine. I think, my view on it is I think it's a great, um, background for people to have as part of the culture. This is, I'm not gonna say that the country was founded as a Christian nation because I don't believe that is true. I think people distort the history about, I'd studied the Constitution, Amendment number 1, freedom of religion, exercise, and establishment. So, no establishment by the government, free exercise by people to do what they feel they should follow. That is the foundation of the country. Anybody wants to say otherwise, I guess they're trying to twist it in a certain way. But I think it's important to have that background. My own kids right now are at Catholic school. My mother's side was more Southern Baptist, a lot of them. I was raised Methodist, which is a little bit more lax in some ways. For instance, I think the main reason why my dad really wanted to go to a Methodist church and not some of the other ones was that he could drink alcohol, and that was a big thing for him. Was like, I'm not going to go to church that I can't drink alcohol. So my dad was not religious. So I mean, I have a very secular parent on one side, and
Mhm,
I had a mother who was raised very doctrinal on the other side, but she was open to the idea of religions around the world and what they signify. So it was actually through some of her exploration into Joseph Campbell and the myth analysis that was important. For instance, to George Lucas when he did Star Wars, that a lot of the basis of the myths and the religions and everything else that people use as guidance for the meaning of life, a lot of them are part of the collective unconscious. So
mhm,
now we're getting to psychology, which is Carl Jung and the collective unconscious, that stories can resonate with people. And like religion, stories are they kind of are our religion more in a secular society these days. So while there's a branch of society that continues to be looking at religion as a bunch of good tenets told in good stories to explain how you should live your life,
mhm,
there's another group of people that simply go to the church of film in some ways to
mhm,
learn about the world. And so when we talk about the psychology of film, we definitely have to talk about sociology, culture, and the more you see films from around the world, the more you realize that people, in essence, are the same, even if some of the specifics are different. Do you agree with that?
I do. I do, and, you know, something I thought of as you were speaking, there's a lot to admire about the different faiths in the world, but there's also some negative sides to religion and, things that I don't agree with. Just as examples, you bring abortion into the subject matter, and a lot of religions don't agree with that, and gays, and I don't have a problem with either of those issues, and so for me, it's a real problem when certain religions do. And it's probably one of the big motivations is why religion's not part of my life.
Right. So in that regard, we're just giving people the background. People don't have to agree with, our outlook of the world, and we're just trying to give an understanding of who we are. We have our feet, though, I think, pretty well in both sides, both the secular and the religious world, just from our upbringing and our understanding of where things come from. So we're going to also inherently have to talk a little bit about politics as we talk about certain films, because film explores the gamut of all human experience, and politics is a large part of human experience. So I'm not saying this podcast is going to be directed toward either particular side of a liberal or conservative, but there may be some discussion of how certain things address liberal versus conservative. I mean, case in point, if we talk about the gospel according to St. Matthew, Pasolini was a leftist, and he basically depicted Christ as a pretty much left wing type of person who wanted people to put their money toward helping people and not having rich people basically collect money in his temple, in God's temple, things of that sort. And so that's the thing that resonated with a Marxist in the 1960s. And actually, the Catholic Church was a big supporter of Pasolini's film, even though they probably wouldn't want to touch any of the stuff that he did in the 70s. So that's an example. You have to talk about some of these things when you talk about certain films. So it's just there. So,
Absolutely.
right. So now the next phase of introducing you to us is, where are these guys coming from when they actually analyze a movie? I think one of the best ways to do that is, what do we like and why? And I want to be clear, this list of films that we're going to talk about is not necessarily that we're saying that all of them are 30 best films ever made. Some of them might make that list, and some of them might not. And that's okay, because it's our list and it's our opinion. But we are going to explain why, and then you're going to see how we analyze things. So, Matt, would you like to discuss one of your favorites, or maybe your very favorite?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we just start off with my favorite film of all time? And there's some pretty close seconds, but I still have to go back to this film, and that would be Steven Spielberg's 1981 film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I remember seeing it in the theater. I was either 10 or 11 when it came out, depending on the month, and it just knocked my socks off. It was exciting looking back as a kid in the theater watching that movie. I could feel my adrenaline kicking up with the action in the film. Harrison Ford, having seen him as Han Solo, to see him as a new character was a thrill. Another hero for those of us that love the Star Wars films. He delivered that. The action was incredible. The score, John Williams' score was amazing. You can't go anywhere without hearing that song and not think of the Raiders films. You hear that melody.
Absolutely.
To see good win over evil, that's always a nice, plus, especially when Nazis are destroyed.
Yes, it's always fun to see Nazis get pummeled by God or by him or whatever in the middle of the movie. Yeah, go
Exactly.
ahead.
And the film still holds up so well. This is back before the CG days, so every shot in this movie is either matte painting, miniature, some kind of optical composite, and back then, optical meant literally having a bunch of reels of film, combining different elements together in a film processing unit. No compositing by computer back then. It was very tedious, very time consuming, it required incredible detail and precision. And anytime the film's on, I just have to sit and watch it. And I think most of the films on this list, if not all of my favorites, are films that when I see them on, I just have to stop and watch for a while, if not the whole movie, because they're that love to me, and it generates an emotion psychologically where, for the case of Raiders, I think as a kid, when I saw it the first time, I walked out of that theater thinking, I wanna be Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
you know? And even now at 55 and a half, I watch Raiders, and I still feel like after watching that movie, yeah, I think I'm Indiana Jones, albeit for a few minutes after the movie ends, you know? So that's my number 1 pick. I just
Okay, well,
love that film.
on my list, it's number 14. I mean, I was still a young man at that time, and even after Star Wars, I'd never seen anything quite like that. And honestly, I gotta put it on my list above Star Wars because Star Wars was the formative movie of my youth, but I've kind of grown up a little bit more now, and I still look back at Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's still some very adult things going on in the subtext of that movie. And I think one of the things that the last time I saw it was actually in the last year. A friend of mine, another friend, it's one of his favorite films, and he wanted to do a Raiders screening at his house, and he actually might even be a guest on this show at some point. When I was watching it again, I still think that the ending of the film, in a film that's made for a Christian culture by a Jewish director, the intense viciousness of the retribution against the Nazis at the end of the film, it's pretty chilling. And when you realize that that director goes on to direct Schindler's List, this is like his most deepest personal fantasy of revenge against them. It is
Mhm.
actually chilling if you think about it from that context, about that aspect. And so, I mean, there are people who are religious people who, I know there's a few GDs in the dialogue here and there, but I mean, that resonance of that film in a Christian society of the Old Testament God coming down and just
Mhm.
wasting the Nazis, that is a really powerful image. And so, anyone who doesn't want to see the rise of fascism, they could watch that movie and say, if that's what the side of good and evil is, then the side of good is about wasting people that want to treat other human beings like detritus. So yeah, he would go on to make Schindler's List. Some people may say, well, that's a more mature film than Raiders of the Lost Ark, but arguably the more effective one in the long term in terms of just culturally people getting exposed at a young age to some of these good and evil, as you say, themes. It's a potent one.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So on that note, my favorite film, and I'll go into the breakdown of why, is Alien. And I don't imagine it's probably going to ever not be, because I don't know if any film is going to ever be able to hit as many of the aspects of me that movie explores. First of all, at a very young age, I was fascinated by space. I think you were as well.
Definitely.
So I thought I was going to be an astrophysicist when people asked me at the age of 6 or something, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" Well, like, how do you even know that word? So, I mean, in kindergarten, I did a science fair project about black holes, and they're like, "How do you even know what that is?" So it's like, but I was fascinated by that, and in senior in high school, the thesis paper for English was about basically Stephen Hawking's book was kind of the the uh, the basis of my analysis of using science to explain the nature of existence, and I was very interested in trying to understand existence. The boundary between science and religion was a fascination for me. So, Alien doesn't necessarily get into the religious aspect. Pretty hard science in some ways. The detail that it addresses the landing of the Nostromo at the beginning, it's kind of, some people might say, well, this is kind of slow and boring, and there's a lot of setup, but it's almost like Ridley said, okay, Star Wars is really exciting, but yet 2001 was elegant. I want to kind of come it somewhere in between those two. And when I say
Mhm.
Ridley, I'm talking about Ridley Scott, the director, of course. I know from reading that he said that Star Wars was something that kind of opened his eyes for what movies could do. And Alien, when he found that, he said, "This is my Star Wars." So, but it's definitely more adult and more mature. It earns its R rating. I think David Cronenberg was kind of upset when they kind of took his body horror thing and ran with it. So he was like, this is my idea. You guys are taking my idea. But
Poor
honestly,
David.
I think Dan O'Bannon, the writer, kind of had it on us when I guess he was so plagued by stomach troubles that he had, like, just it plagued him constantly, that the alien coming out of the stomach was something that was very personal to how he felt at times from his health. So, give a nod to Dan O'Bannon. Sorry that you had to suffer through that, but you created an amazing work of art. And so the alien to me is kind of like the representation of the pure technological human. And the art that is the basis of the design from H.R. Giger
Mhm.
was meant to reflect that. There was a definite thematic approach what they're trying to show. Like, okay, so if we take, this German, incidentally, um, um, artist takes this idea of taking the perfect blend of purpose and tenacity and just pure effectiveness. The alien is that. It's the top of the food chain. So any heart you might have for anything and sympathy, the alien doesn't have it. It's just ruthless, and it will just to spread its spawn, as we saw in the second film. That's its primary objective, is to win. And when the company on the ship wants to harness it to use for its purpose, it's the perfect attack against capitalism gone amok. So there have to be some restraints on capitalism. And watching these working class people on this rig, basically trying to survive against not only this alien life form, but also the intent of their company to make sure that they bring it back, whether they survive or not. That is an amazing element of all these themes coming together in one perfect film.
It's also on my list, and this subject will come up pretty soon when we talk about another of my favorite films by Ridley Scott, and that's Ridley's ability to build worlds. And
Yes,
Alien's a great example of world building. I think I was probably, I don't know if I was still 9, I was probably 10 when I first saw it, and it would have been a VHS. Definitely didn't see it in a theater when it first came out.
same here.
And I think it was with
Thankfully.
a babysitter. I don't think my mom's mom, my grandmother loved to watch R-rated movies with my brother and me, but I
Well,
think
the
we saw it with a
nightmare
babysitter.
factor, though, of Alien, I mean, it disturbed me
Yeah,
that night.
yeah.
I saw it on video. If I saw it in the theater, God knows how it would have scarred me. I mean,
It scared the
seriously.
crap out of me, and I'm pretty sure I remember the first viewing when the chest burster broke out of Kane's chest. I probably had my fingers covering my face, and I was peeking through my fingers, because I was too freaked out to watch it completely. And then the sound design too. The sound design gives you a good idea what's happening, and it still freaks you out when you're
Mhm.
not even watching the screen. But, it's another film like Raiders that was pre-CG, miniatures, practical effects. You touched on Giger. I'm a huge fan of Giger's work. And when I remember, seeing the documentaries on the making of the film, when Ridley Scott saw Giger's artwork and specifically the alien, he said, "That's it. That's it. That's it. We're going to go with that. There's no other choice. We got to go with that." And sure enough, they got Giger's cooperation, and it turned out to be an incredible Oscar-winning film with production design and special effects, and I wish the film scared me today the way it did as a kid. There's really only one film that does that now, and that's The Exorcist, but
Yeah.
I've seen it so many times that I guess it's just normal for you kinda get numb of it with it, to some extent, but, you touched on the whole corporate subject matter with the corporate world, and you got these middle class grunts, as the corporate office sees them, that are basically just their job's just to get this specimen and bring it back. We don't care what happens to them. We just need
Mhm.
the specimen. They're
Yep.
they're expendable, right? They're expendable. We want what we want. We're paying a lot of money to get it. Just do your jobs. And are you going to get a bonus? We'll see. Just bring the specimen home. If any of you live,
Right. The other thing is the jump scare, not even a jump scare, I guess, but the surprise, the twist of Kane's birthing of the alien. It's not even the most shocking scene in the movie, believe it or not, for me at least. When the ash reveal happens, I was like,
yeah,
"What is going on? Why is this white stuff coming out of this guy? What is I don't get this." It's like my brain could not I could figure out what was going on when the alien came out of Kane, but I did not have a clue what was going on there. I was so, and just it was so disturbing, and especially the way he was trying to kill Sigourney Weaver like moments before that. And so
With the
with
magazines?
a magazine down the throat and like, he's
Yeah.
trying to shove it down her throat and they can't get his arm to come up because he's got that robotic force to keep it in there. And it's just like, wow. And just when I thought like I had seen everything that this movie had to offer, I was like, what the hell is that? So, I mean, again, just brilliant. Like, just keeping you turning and turning and turning. Like she goes to Mother. Again, the name of the ship is Mother. So you have again that kind of birth and death kind of life cycle kind of thing. And Mother's like, you know what? You're all expendable. you know, that's the plan. You guys were meant to go there and get it, and you can all die for all we care.
Right.
So it's like, thanks, Mother.
Mhm.
What kind of mother are you?
Mhm.
Yeah. So what a future we have if that's the future, man.
Pretty grim.
Let us hope not. Well, you already brought it up, so we might as well talk about Ridley's other film on the list. Both of our lists, Blade Runner is on there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the first time I saw Blade Runner would have been on VHS, and then eventually it became available through Criterion on Laserdisc, and the Criterion Laserdisc was actually the entire 235-to-1 aspect ratio.
Mhm.
So, in the years I've been watching that film on VHS, as everybody knows, back then it was pan and scan, the process of converting a film to VHS, where they basically would blow up sections of the frame to fill up your 133 to 1 TV, and you were missing sometimes half, if not more, the frame of the film. And so when I finally was able to watch it on that Criterion Laserdisc, it opened it up even more than I had already loved the film, because I'm now seeing what Ridley Scott's true vision was. And the opening of the film with Vangelis's music, and having grown up in California, I grew up in Orange County, but I drive a lot to Los Angeles, and although it's not become what we see in the film yet, you can kind of see it's on its way there. Maybe not with the refineries, but I think the skyscrapers are on their way there. Certainly, you've got class differences that are pretty apparent, and even more so now than they probably were when I was a kid 50 years ago. The world that Ridley created, just like with Alien, the world of Los Angeles of the future, it felt so real. Even today, as I watch that movie, it feels so real. The grime, the overpopulation, the people on bikes versus those in their spinners or other means of transportation. The food, you can almost smell, you can feel and smell the movie, like the noodle stand. You can almost kind of like taste the noodles, you know? It was
Taffy's
such
bar,
a,
the smoke and all
what's
that,
that?
the smoke in Taffy's bar and
Yeah.
all that, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, it touched on the genetic replicants, and that was a cool idea. I think that was the first time that had come up in films when I was 10 years old or 12 years old, whenever Blade Runner came out in 82. So I was probably 12 or 13. And the idea of geneticists being able to clone or create humans or biological entities that are like humans, but they're controllable, they're programmable. And it's a fascinating idea. I'm just blown away by the film in so many ways, and it still knocks my socks off every time I watch it. Another film that I have to, if it's on, I got to sit and watch it. It's hard not to just sit there and just take it in every time it comes on. It's. I think we could look at AI as a subject of the film. Ridley, you mentioned, was influenced by Star Wars. There's no doubt he was influenced by 2001. AI is a huge subject of 2001, and you know genetically engineered life forms is probably something that will happen one day. It makes you wonder what's going on in labs that we don't know about. You hear rumors of gene splicing between humans and animals and giving warriors a turtle like shell to make them impervious on the battlefield. So it's a remarkable film. I know I'm rambling on. Take over. Let me hear your thoughts on it.
I mean, pretty much that sums it up. He fills the frame with layers. There's mise en scène is character. It defines what society is like. And so, those who don't study film theory, mise en scène is basically production design. It's the setting that the characters are moving through. And so, Ridley pays so much attention to the details of mise en scène with lighting and the sets that you are transported. And again, part of the necessity for psychology of film is to buy into the fantasy that what you're seeing is real, and we're being transported to the future. It's obviously not our 2019 at this point, but it still could be some version of the future that might be closer to 2049, like the sequel, or 2099, like the forthcoming series. So, but either way, there are elements there that they're coming, they're happening. So, the fact that so much of it felt like you could taste it almost. A lot of critics, even at the time, kind of dismissed it. Now people look at it and say it's before its time, and it's probably even partially still before its time, to be honest. So, but yeah, I mean, nowadays I'll refer to critics lists, and there are lists of lists that people do. This is considered a top 50 film now, even after being dismissed by both audiences and the critics at the time. So you can come back and relook at things and have a totally different perspective, and it's fine because maybe the first time you couldn't absorb everything, and then later you see it again. I know, like David Lynch's Dune was one that I remember that people were kind of like that. They're like, I don't get this movie. I just can't even follow what else going on. But then when they come back and they view it second, third time, they're like, oh, now I see how it kind of all fits together. And so, I'd read the book, so I knew kind of going in what was to expect on that one. But I'm not saying that's on my top 30 list, but I'm just saying that you can revisit things and maybe come to a deeper appreciation. Sometimes you don't really fully see a film and how it works until you've seen it a second time. And for the most part, I think most of the films that we will talk about on this podcast will be something that we've seen multiple times, because you cannot really analyze what it's doing to you while you're first watching it because you're experiencing it. Do you agree?
Mhm. I do. I do. And another little tidbit about Blade Runner, while it's in my mind, it's a film that takes place in Los Angeles, was actually filmed in Los Angeles. And although a lot was done on the set, you can still go to the Bradbury Building and see where the end of the film was shot. And right across the street, you can see the $1 Million Theater, which is still there. So that's kind of exciting to have a film that's 40 plus years old now, and you can still visit locations where they actually filmed it back in 1981
And I go through
prior to
that
its
tunnel
release.
downtown too, where
Yeah,
the
that's right.
uh, um, where he's listening to Leon's test, and the shot goes off and it echoes down that tunnel.
And it echoes.
Uh,
Yeah, great
I
sound
don't know how it
design
echoes.
work.
He's listening to it in his car, but it's a nice little sound
It
design
works
thing.
though. It
It
does
works,
work.
absolutely. It creates the environment, right? Okay, so we gotta move along though if we're gonna get through this list, because, the next one I think is another easy one for both of us because it's on both of our lists, The Godfather.
Mhm.
So, that is on your greatest list, right?
It is.
Yes. So, I think there's an argument that many have stated, and it's kinda hard to refute, so I'm gonna just put it out there, that it might be the greatest film ever made. Do you have any problem if someone was to say that to you? It's the greatest film ever made.
Not at all. Not at
Right.
all.
So, and I
No.
think the reason for this is, folks, especially American audience, this is the film about the immigrant experience in its second and third stages, basically. The first stage is actually in Godfather Part 2, and that's also got to be high up on a lot of people's lists. My actually both of my kids actually prefer Godfather 2 to Godfather 1 for its more novelistic aspects. You get the overlap between Vito's formative years and then Michael's succession as his successor. And But what's so great about The Godfather is it's a series of perfect scenes that any one of them would be some of the best scenes of any movie, but it's a
Mhm.
series of every one of them almost is one. And then you have things like you have this exploration of family, and then you have his career doing all this nefarious stuff. We don't really see a whole lot of what they do. We hear about it more. We don't really see them going around shooting people and enforcing collections and all that kind of stuff. But you know what he does. But he's at the top. He's got this esteem in his community, people that he helps. You see the first guy that comes in at the beginning, and here we establish also the amazing cinematography that at the time the studio heads were basically saying, you got to reshoot this because I can't see what's going on. how is the
Mhm,
audience supposed to know what's going on here? It's like, um,
mhm.
it was a style that became a signature for Gordon Willis, um, and Coppola probably never exceeded it. He himself feels like it's not his best films. I mean, they're not as personal to him, but I don't know what he's talking about because I mean, all this Italianness in it. I mean, that's got to be
Yeah.
somewhat personal to him
It's
even
gotta
today.
be.
I mean, he put his
Yeah.
daughter in as the daughter of Michael in the third film. So I mean, come
Mhm,
on, he's got to be identifying some here. So
mhm.
it's a masterpiece.
It
What
is.
else can you say about it?
Yeah, you can't think of The Godfather, the first film or the sequels, without thinking of family. And even though I'm not Italian, obviously wasn't raised Italian, you can't help about think of your family when you watch these characters in these films and your relationships with your own family members in comparison to the relationships that these people have in this cinema world. You mentioned the studios fighting with Coppola. They fought with him big time over the casting of Pacino. And Pacino does an amazing job in this film because here you have Michael who's come back from war and he tells Kay, the love of his life, that's my family, Kay. That's not me. But what do we see? What do we see in the next 2.5 hours? We see Michael go through tragedy and then take over the family, and he becomes probably, you could argue, more ruthless than his father.
You know what's interesting is kind of like Alien, actually. Both films involve a large cast of characters that you don't really see who's gonna be the one to be the survivor, the winner, the one to take over the family in this case. Like, when you first see Alien, Tom Skerritt was the best known name, he was in MASH, other things. Who was Sigourney Weaver? I think she was introduced, but yet she's the only person who survives. So same thing here. Michael is not involved in the business. He is as out of it as can be, yet that night when he visits his father at the hospital and the guard is gone and he's figuring out what to do, and he knows they're coming, and he finds himself, and maybe it's because of his military training or something. He is just completely unfazed by anything that happens, and he just goes through the crisis and he survives it. And with that, he learns that he can be effective, and gradually, the hot-headed brother ends up getting himself killed with his stupidity. The dumb brother, who's older than him, can't manage things because he doesn't have the head for business, and he's the one who is the Godfather. And so the thing is, like, people think about the Godfather. Well, it's about Marlon Brando. I mean, he's the
Mm-mm,
Godfather. It's like it's not about him. He doesn't change. He is the Godfather when the movie starts. Michael becoming the Godfather is the point of the movie. Okay, he
it
is the
is.
Godfather,
That's
and at
right.
the end, and they're kissing the ring, and the door closes on Kay. That
Mhm.
is when he finally becomes the subject of the movie.
Yeah. And, I know Coppola had his fights with the studio over casting, but what an incredible casting job. I mean, you look at all of the members of that cast, you know, despite what Brando did before The Godfather, you can't mention Brando without thinking of The Godfather. Pacino, of course, who played Sonny?
James Caan.
James Caan. And I'll tell you something that's as a fan of makeup effects and Dick Smith in particular, that sequence where Sonny's executed, that's kinda like the execution of Murphy in RoboCop. I still have trouble watching that sequence because it's so well done and it looks so authentic, and it hurts to watch it. It's so well done. It's so brutal. And the actor that played Fredo, terrific. I forget his name off the hand.
John Cazale.
Cazale, and he was nominated. He was in, like, 3 or 4 or 5 films nominated for Best Picture,
He
almost
had a
every
great
film he was
decade
in.
before he died, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible track record. There was another thought I had about The Godfather.
The music,
It's one of Go ahead.
the music.
The music,
You know the
absolutely.
theme. It's just, you know, what would if you didn't have that theme, it's like the sense of Italianness just from the music when it starts. I
Yeah,
mean, you're already
yeah.
there in the thing, the psychology of it.
And the supporting cast, like, Luca Brasi as the family leg breaker. What a character. I heard in the documentary, I think, about it, that he was I think he was a tough guy, maybe a bouncer in real life, and somehow he got cast in the film, and There were challenges with him delivering dialogue, which kind of plays off in the film where he's practicing to congratulate the Don of the on the wedding of his daughter, you know? And, it's just such an amazing film that no character is wasted. The story is incredible. It's a great piece of American filmmaking. I know back in the '90s when I was in film school, it's definitely one of those that we studied for good reason, and I'm sure it'll be studied for all eternity by filmmakers and wannabe filmmakers.
Yes, it's
No, it's just an
definitely a
extraordinary
memorable one.
film.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
Mhm. Okay, so my number 3 film Blade Runner, by the way, is my number 4. My number
Okay.
3 film is another Spielberg film, but I put it a little higher than Raiders, Jaws.
Mm,
And the reason why I put it a little bit higher, um, is I mean, it was the blockbuster to make all blockbusters. I mean, Godfather did really well, Exorcist did really well right before that. Sound of Music had a great run back in the '60s, but obviously Gone with the Wind, but that was over years of rentals. So, but Jaws, with the rollout that they did for that over the summer, it created summer blockbuster films. But despite all that, if you when you watch it, you wouldn't know that to think about it in that one sense because when you watch any of the summer blockbusters, except maybe if you watch a Christopher Nolan film, they're not like it. I mean, Jaws is so character driven. I mean, you have a scene where Brody's sitting there at the table making faces at his kid while he's drinking, you
mm,
know,
it's a great scene.
his concerns away. I mean, and that's like the scene until Richard Dreyfuss walks in. I mean, it's like, they're singing on the boat, toasting their legs and all this. And he talks, Robert Shaw talks about the USS Indianapolis for like 10 minutes in this John Milius written monologue that's just so gripping. And it's just a one guy talking for like
Mhm.
minutes and minutes about this, but it's so riveting and psychologically absorbing that you're just sucked in and you can almost imagine what it was like for that experience. And so, great action, beautifully shot, all these, well cut Spielberg genius camera moves and positioning and everything else you want to talk about. But the character stuff is what is so amazing about what drives that movie.
Absolutely, and, it's one of those fans of the film know that they had a lot of problems with the shark, mechanical problems with the mechanical shark, and, it caused Spielberg and the crew a lot of stress on set, and, the actors, particularly, Richard Dreyfuss, like to joke about it even to this day, and they would imitate the PA call out, "The shark is not working. The shark is not working. The shark is working. We can go back to work."
I can
But
hear
it's one of
that
those
in my head.
unique circumstances where because the shark didn't function as frequently as they may have liked, it benefited the film. And we probably saw the shark less than what Spielberg initially envisioned, but it turned out for the benefit of the film in the sense of what you've touched on, which is story and character. You can't help but love the characters in this film, including, mean guy Quint, because we realized that Quint's had a tough life. And, that speech, the Indianapolis speech, you mentioned Milius had wrote it, and then apparently Robert Shaw did a little work on it and finessed it a little bit in his own way. And that apparently what he did with it and the way he read it was what and performed it is what we
Mhm.
got in the film. But
Yeah.
it's just a remarkable film. You walk out of that movie and you're thrilled. You're absolutely thrilled. And you're elated, you know, there's points I think back in '75 it came out, so I probably saw it when I was probably 8 years old, 9 years old. It probably took a while to get to home video. But, at that age, that film scared the crap out of me.
When they are underneath the boat with Hooper. Brody's up on the water, but Hooper goes under to look at the boat, the Ben, whatever his name was, that
Ben Gardner?
Ben
Yeah.
Gardner. So he goes down and he's gonna get the tooth out of the hole, and then they spring the body that I
That cutaway of the head popping out, that was done in the editor of the film's pool in the
okay.
San Fernando Valley. Her house was in the San Fernando Valley. They shot that in her pool because Spielberg, during test screenings, he's like, I need another gotcha. And that's what they shot to just give the audience one more gotcha. Another film with the score. I mean, Donna, Donna,
Yeah.
dun, 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 dun. It's like so recognizable, but on the same token, I still feel it give me anxiety when I hear that. It's not his
I think
ET score.
I think Spielberg initially wasn't sure. He's like, "John, can you do this really?" I mean,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
obviously you can because it certainly worked. So,
and,
one more thing about this
sure,
film is the sociological in addition to the psychological. What do these men represent? Quint is very much your working class person. So there's a class issue going on here. Hooper is
definitely.
rich. He's got the scientific boat. Quint's like, I don't trust any of that crap. I like the good old ways. We're throwing chum in the water and we're putting
Mhm,
barrels in it. And Cooper's
mhm.
got his drugs and his cage and all this stuff. And ultimately, neither of them are successful. And I think there's, as I was, then we have the mayor with his reaction to the situation as well. We can't shut down the beach. We're going to lose too much money.
Right.
When COVID happened, I just was thinking to myself, man, this movie is like right on the nose. I mean, it's got the whole political situation. You've got a bunch of business people who don't want to close everything down, but yet when someone gets killed again, it's like, well, now we have no choice, and so and then the class warfare. So I mean, there's a lot of cultural things that existed in the '70s that maybe weren't quite to the fore in the culture at the time. I mean, I think a lot of people were hurting in the '70s generally, so they weren't really thinking about necessarily rich versus poor or things like that. But I mean, it still resonates today culturally and sociologically, in that regard.
One last thought from my vantage point on it. It's also a film that I have to watch in the summertime, you know? Whether I've seen it in the winter or not, I have to watch it in the summer and hopefully long weekend of July
So
4th.
like work.
It's just like, you think of films, Christmas films and summer films. Like for me, Jaws is the perfect summer film. And granted, it came out in the summer. The story takes place in the summer. But for me, having seen it as a kid, it's kind of like it's part of my history that I have to feel that everything's right in the world. I have to watch Jaws at some point in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
understandable.
just one of those that it's a film that really it touched me, and my brother to this day doesn't like going in the ocean because of Jaws.
I think that's true for a lot of people.
Yep.
Fortunately, Psycho didn't have quite the same effect on showers because otherwise everybody would stink.
Right. That would be a little scary. We'd
Right.
all be taking baths.
Yes.
And then Freddy Krueger would scare everybody from the bathtub.
Yeah, and hey, you just picked on, one of my, top 30 choices there, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? It's on my back. No, it is on my list. Yes. It's incredible. Go ahead.
yeah, okay, so now we get into the real psychological stuff because Nightmare on Elm Street is all about dreams, and this is celluloid dreams, and so when we talk about the darkness of dreams, this film is well, I actually wrote a script that was influenced by it. What can you say? I mean, it's a interesting idea of just what can you do if you cannot escape your own dreams. So people who have mental illness kind of deal with this day to day, and there may not be a specific guy with finger knives, but there may be something like it. Actually, my nephew has schizophrenia. I mean, he's kind of in a waking dream kind of thing where he sees things that aren't there. He's very open about it. He has his own podcast. Actually, he might actually make an appearance here someday. I definitely will invite him, especially when we talk about films that deal with psychological illness. um, but you know, Wes Craven is a horror master. I mean, Last House on the Left was kind of one of those films that showed that you can be very kind of gritty and low budget and be very disturbing by being so. And it did predate Texas Chainsaw actually at showing that you can get away with it. And actually, Sean Cunningham, who produced Friday the 13th, produced Last House on the Left. But I don't have a fondness for that movie. It's kind of an experience to get through in some ways. But Nightmare on Elm Street is also it has its own visual charms with the dream environment. I mean, he didn't have a huge budget. It doesn't have elaborate sets. A lot of times, it's just houses and schools and things that you can do interiors without really spending a lot on sets. But the
Mhm.
imagination of it is greater than its budget, and that's another kind of genius. Is making something come alive in people's minds without a lot of money, and I respect it greatly that he was able to pull that off.
You know, I made a mistake as my 55-year-old eyes are looking at my list. I actually have Nightmare Before Christmas on my list. Nightmare Before Elm Street's on my backup list, but it's
Okay.
still one of my favorite horror films. And the idea of being attacked when you're sleeping is horrifying because most of us, look at sleeping as our escape from everything, the stress of the workday. Our partner is fighting with us, whatever it might be. We look at sleep as our escape. And the concept of being attacked or murdered or maimed in your sleep, you know, I think I was freaked out after seeing that for a while, wondering, is Freddy gonna come get me when I go to sleep? Because when this film came out, I was still a pretty young lad, and, I had thoughts like that going in my head. Well, it's like, Freddy, just like Jaws might get me in the ocean, Freddy might get me in my dreams,
So you could stay out of the
It's,
ocean.
yeah, and, it's the score. I remember the score being very perfect for that film and frightening as well, and Robert Englund's performance is terrific. Gotta give credit to the makeup crew,
Yep.
for creating what they did
I wanna touch on
with
the score before you go away from it, but there's something that has been kinda running through a lot of these films that we've chosen here so far, is the importance of music.
Mhm.
There are films that I like that maybe have no score, but a good portion of my favorite films to watch that are kind of a comfort to me is that there's a coordination of the music and the visual. There may be a rhythmic aspect, and we'll get into that as we talk about editing, how it affects your psychology, especially how the pace of an edit can kind of get you worked up as you have shots that keep changing rapidly and how that can affect you. But the music can do that too, and the atmosphericness of the music of this film, it does kind of put you in that dream world. It does.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. And getting back to Robert Englund's performance, great, great work. I think prior to this film, he had done, I think he was in Big Wednesday, and he did the TV show V, which I think was around the time of the first Nightmare on Elm Street. I can't remember if it was before or after
Yeah.
Nightmare, but it was around the same time. And so Robert Englund wasn't a big star. He was a recognizable character actor, but Nightmare and Freddy Krueger made him a star, and he did such an amazing job with it, and I'm sure he had a lot of fun with Nightmare and the sequels, the things that Freddy got to say, the things that Freddy got to do. It must have been a blast, performing that character the way he did.
And actually, what's interesting, did you ever see Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
I did, it's been a long time, though. I need to
which
revisit that.
predated Scream? So that
Okay.
film actually addresses the Nightmare on Elm Street phenomenon. I mean, Wes Craven's a character in this film. Heather Langenkamp, who plays Nancy, is a character in this film, a lead character. Robert Englund plays himself and addresses the Freddy craze, the fans and that they idolize Freddy and how scary that kind of is in some ways.
Mhm.
So it's one of the it's an earlier meta movie before Scream that addresses um, the art of creation, and Craven's actually talking about, I'm trying to put this out into the world so I can get rid of that evil that's dwelling in our subconscious. And so it references nursery rhymes about, one of the solutions of the how to beat the Freddy in this version of the movie is knowing a secret from a nursery rhyme, and that's what the nursery rhymes were, to teach you how to beat those demons in your sleep. If you're a little kid and you wake up in the middle of the night, how are you going to fight them off? So it's very interesting how that goes further into the subconscious even than Nightmare on Elm Street does on that next level.
Very cool. I have to revisit that film, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those ones that's like, okay, this isn't considered perhaps a great film, but it's one that should be revisited because it's an interesting progression toward now this craze that everybody has for Scream. I like Scream a lot, especially the first two, but I think the genesis of it was very interesting as well. And it came as an extension from the Nightmare on Elm Street idea.
Mhm. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Do you want me to
More
bring
from
up one
you.
from my list?
Yeah, go
So
for it.
let me do this. Let me mention one of 2 superhero films on my list of
Okay.
favorites. And this one will be Richard Donner's 1978 film Superman the Movie. And my father took my brother and I to see this film at the Edwards Big Newport, which is still there. They've added to it, but back in the '70s when I was a youngster, that was pretty much the only theater going that was a big theater. And I think they could show 70 millimeter prints at the Edwards Big Newport. And this Superman was probably a 70 millimeter print. And the theater was packed. And I think initially we had to sit on the floor until we found seats to sit down. And as a kid, I was familiar with the Superman character and the story. This is a film too that I not only loved as a kid, but I appreciate the film even more now as an adult and a middle-aged guy. It's a just like The Godfather, Superman the movie is another slice of Americana. We got the history of Superman in comic form, and what Richard Donner and Mario Puzo, who wrote the screenplay, were able to do is
Incidentally,
make it
from The Godfather.
believable. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Isn't it
Yeah,
though?
Puzo had quite a track record there. Oh, it starts off with Krypton, and, they use some pretty interesting techniques with the characters in Krypton wearing these reflective suits that when they were filmed, they would get this reflection off of them. So they had a science fiction kind of high-tech look to them. And, again, this is a film that was made pre-CG, so everything's either practical, miniature, optical effect, combination of anything, or a beautiful set. There were some incredible sets built for this movie. Krypton's just one of them. And Chris Reeves, I believe, they shot 1 and 2 simultaneously for the most part. At some point, they quit, I think, to focus on 1 to finish it for the release date. But Chris Reeves was like 24 when he started on the first Superman movie, and I think over the span of the 2 films, he celebrated a couple of birthdays. But take to look at a 24-year-old young man and to see what he accomplished in that film, playing both roles as Superman and as Clark Kent, I'm still blown away by it, and I know there've been some incarnations of Superman in the theater since then. None of them have come close, in my
Not
opinion,
close,
to what
not a
Chris
bit.
Reeves and Richard Donner accomplished, and you've got an incredible Lois Lane character by the late Margot Kidder and the late Chris Reeves too, unfortunately. This movie has a lot of heart. You could tell there was a lot of love that went into this movie, and it's another film where you walk out of it feeling great, you know? Superman saved the day, Lois is okay. The world's gonna be fine. John Williams score, it's one of my favorite John Williams scores.
There he is again, John
Every now
Williams.
and then I heard something in the background, I don't
I said, "There you
but,
go again, John Williams."
yeah, I know, and it's amazing score. I hear that and I can't help but think of the movie right away. Boom. That score is just and I know recently they kinda did a modified version with guitars for the latest Superman, but that didn't quite work for me, but, um yeah, it's another film that just when it's on, I have to sit and watch it, and, there's nothing really highbrow about it. It's the good guy versus the bad guys, but it's so well done, and they did such an incredible job. Everything from costume design to set design, the visual effects at the time were terrific. It's just everything came together. That's I think a lot of these films on our favorites list, it's like everything came together from all the departments, including the writers. We can't forget the writers. And they just all departments came together and hit it out of the park. And it's a film that I'm gonna love till the day I'm gone.
Right, and it was the, formative origin story film. You even get a little taste of his parents before he's sent off as a baby, so you get Marlon Brando with his $1,000,000 per minute performance, which is really great, honestly. I mean, he did a
It
great
is
job.
great.
He
Yeah.
may have been worth that $1,000,000 a minute, but,
He is Jor-El.
yeah. So and then you've got, the introduction of Superman when Lois is put in jeopardy on the helicopter. Real
Yeah.
suspense. I mean, at that point, we hadn't really seen anything quite like that. Um,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, how is she gonna get out of this one? And then boom. So it's like, I mean, anybody who watched, I guess, the Superman serial, from years before with George Reeves or whatever, I mean, you would know. But it's just being in a movie was different. I mean, we saw, POW Batman, with all the that stuff, and we didn't have a superhero movie like that. It was a huge introduction for me as well. It was the next year after Star Wars, so it's like, you know, wow, it's like another thing, another landmark kind of thing. So, and it wasn't really until Tim Burton's Batman that we started to get a little more cynical about our superheroes, and but Superman was he was not really he didn't really have a dark side at all. But
Mm,
at that time, in the 70s, again, things were a little, people were a little stressed out about the economy. I mean, interest rates were high, oil crisis, we
mhm,
got rid of a president a couple years earlier, maybe been 4 years earlier. Anyway, that was a different time and people needed that little beacon of hope. Where is that now, I guess? I think we kinda
yeah,
need it in some ways, but, we're way too cynical now to embrace it in the way we did then. But, after that was Reagan's city on a hill idea, and people were really believing that about this country, and it was a we grew up in that time, and even though there were darker things perhaps happening under the surface, it was a very good time to be raised. My kids actually say to me sometimes, especially my oldest daughter, that you were so lucky that you lived in the 80s and 90s. That was a great time.
mm.
And it was, honestly. I feel that way. How about you?
I agree. I mean, my childhood was idyllic, not only for where I grew up, which was partly luck because it was the military, the Marine Corps, that brought my parents to California. My father was stationed at El Toro. And, the location we grew up, the time we grew up, I mean, we had a lot of these films we're talking about are in that era, the
Yes.
70s and 80s.
Yep.
And, has your daughter given you examples of what about today makes her wish that she grew up
Well,
in the era
she
we did?
doesn't necessarily say it in that way. I think there was some prosperity in the Clinton years. It seemed like things were pretty hopeful in the 80s. But also, like, she attaches to the cultural aspects too. I mean, she likes a lot of the music and films from that time period.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think the 90s and early 2000s might be, frankly, the best period of film.
Mhm, mhm.
If I look at just sheer number of great product that was coming out, you had the post Sundance, after Sex, Lies, and Videotape, all the Sundance stuff that came, and all the flooding in the market with these new avenues of making great films outside the studio system, plus the studios trying to then compete with that. I mean, looking at the bench in the 70s, as much as we love 70s and 80s films in our personal list, I mean, it's a deeper bench in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s. It really is.
Yeah.
So that is, I mean, if you are attracted to that part of the culture, and because of me introducing her to a lot of this, she's like, "Hey, I got to go back and now watch all this stuff without growing up through it like you did. You got to actually go to the theater and
Yeah.
see all that stuff, and I got
Yeah.
to watch it." And oh, I want to make this mention here
Sure.
that um, a lot of the stuff that I'm watching now, and I have kids, as you know,
Mhm.
and
I do.
it's hard to get to the theater as much as you, but I now
Mhm.
project at home on a 120-inch screen, and this is the way I have to, re-expose to my kids what I got to see, because watching even on a 72-inch screen is not the same experience as at the theater. They still don't have the audience participation aspect of clapping or people jumping in their seats at the scary parts or whatever, but they get as close to it as I can get for them to see it on the projector.
Yeah, it's a great substitute for the theater. It's a big screen presentation at home.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think a future episode, maybe we can touch on the technology, but the technology we have for home theater today, I was begging for it back in the early '80s, like in '82 when Blade Runner came out. It's like, God, I wanna see this in widescreen, then I have to wait for Criterion. Now we have the 4K OLED and then projection systems like you have that can not only do 4K, but 3D, so you have a big screen doing 3D, and, if it's done right like an Avatar, it must look amazing, you
Yeah,
know?
it looks
Then, of
pretty good.
course,
I
you could
I watched I watched actually some of Way of Water on the screen with 3D, and it looks good. And
Yeah,
I watched Gravity as
yeah.
well. Gravity is another 3D experience
Oh,
that honestly you haven't seen the film unless you've seen it projected in 3D, honestly.
4K is coming out this year, I've heard, in Gravity.
Well, that'll be cool too, but
Yeah,
still,
yeah,
the
but the
3 I mean, I did
3D,
show it to them in 3D on
amazing.
the screen, and they got
Yeah,
most of the
that
input
that
from it.
was that was raw, and it still looks amazing. I watched it not too long ago. Getting back really quick to the point about the differences when we grew up versus now, I can't help but think that social media has affected the outlook on the way people get along and look at each other today. You know, the expression bad news travels fast. Well, social media gets bad news out instantaneously, and not just bad news, but hostile news and hatred news, and we didn't have that growing up. I mean, I was in college, I think, before dial-up internet became a thing. So when you and I were in school as kids, we were still using typewriters to type our reports. We didn't have phones where we could get news and look at social media and critique things and have people critique us. You know, these kids today, they post something and they get people ripping on them because they don't like the style of their hair, they don't like the color of their clothing. You know, it's just for all the good that it does, there's definitely some negativity that I think's affected society from it.
Yeah, there's a lot actually. The other thing is that it's so accessible and it's so easy to scroll. So you can kill
Mhm,
time just by, "Oh, that looks interesting," and, "Oh, that looks interesting." So to the
mhm,
idea that you can sit down and just simmer in a 2 hour to 3 hour event, that's just one event that you aren't flipping through and focus that time, I think it makes it harder for people to devote the attention to that. And this leads to another aspect of this program, and maybe the only one that we haven't really talked about yet, which is part of being film aficionados is sort of sitting in that awe of perfection that you don't have in the world. So
mhm,
some of the films that you can, if you take the time to find them, and they aren't the latest superhero film that's at the theater, which is bang, 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 loud, fast, all this. Find something that is spiritually uplifting in a peaceful sense. That one of the ones on my list that kind of makes me feel somewhat this way is Tree of Life.
mhm,
There's a quality to it of spiritualism, honestly. I mean, it's a character looking back on his life and his upbringing, and there's some little bit of trauma with his father. Brad Pitt's character is a little bit on the tough side. But the reason why that film made my list, honestly, is um, when my grandfather died and I went back home to visit with my family, that was kind of like the only thing I wanted to see because it was so much about a person looking back on their life when someone is gone from your life and how you're wanting to see our place in the universe. I mean, the film actually goes back and shows the dinosaurs at one point and the
right,
formation of the universe and all this kind of stuff in a very 2001-esque kind of way. But I mean, that was one of the most comforting things that I could just sit in, and I've gone back to it, maybe once since then to see it again for the third time. But it made just a very profound impression as an experience, and some of the visualization of his shots when he was growing up in Texas, you get this real sense that he's sort of recording in this movie these moments that he remembers from his childhood of just looking up at the trees, the sun coming down. I mean, it brings me back to how I felt in my childhood being outside, honestly. So
mhm,
if you can find some films that have that quality, so you're not just watching something that's horror and dark and putting stuff into your head that's going to disturb you, but finding something that brings you peace and calm. We're going to try to address some of those as well.
sure, absolutely. Yeah, I remember seeing Tree of Life in the theater. It might have been with you and maybe some of our other film-going friends, but I don't think I've seen it since then, and it's another one that you bring up that I need to revisit.
Definitely. There's a criterion of that on Blu-ray at this point. I would not be surprised if there will be a 4K in our future. I mean, the cinematography in that is pretty much unparalleled.
It deserves
It's
a 4K.
a lot of it's Luzbecki, the DP of choice for like Quaron for like Children of Men, and uh, he's done some of the others work for the Three Amigos as well. So, but I mean, it's just a cinematography masterpiece. just shot after shot after shot of just these wide angle lens type, everything in focus and just sharp, sharp, sharp. Even on the Blu-ray, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, really good depth of field.
Yeah. So yeah, people that use, we'll get into the, later on as we go through all the elements of film, we'll get into how lens choice affects your experience. But wide angle lens people like Kubrick, I mean, everything looks good on home video because everything is sharp. And then when they digitize it, it looks great. So, yeah.
Very good. Now, is it your turn or my turn?
Well, let me ask you this. Have you addressed your top five yet? Because I've done four of my top five so far. So have you
Let's see. We got
covered
Blade
your top
Runner,
five, you think?
Jaws. Okay. Um, I'm gonna. I think this is a fair choice. Irvin Kershner took the director reins in 1980 to direct The Empire Strikes Back, and as we know, that's the sequel to the original Star Wars film from '77. And I saw this film at the Big Newport again. It was probably a 70 millimeter presentation. And as we've already discussed, I loved the first film and was excited like all the kids at that time of seeing The Empire Strikes Back. And I didn't really know what to expect, although I didn't really care because I knew we were going to see our heroes back in action. And the one thing I wasn't prepared for was probably my favorite Star Wars character to this day, and that's Yoda. And in the years since, realizing how they accomplished Yoda at that time with Frank Oz puppeteering a puppet, doing the voice. When I saw Empire in '82, you could not have told me that that was a puppet. And even still, when I watch Empire, the way they lit Yoda, the way they shot Yoda, the way Frank Oz performed Yoda, the way the face moved and the mouth moved, I still don't feel Yoda as a puppet. That's a performance and an emotional performance. And I remember being blown away by the beginning where we had the attack on Hoth and the Imperial walkers coming in and Luke getting into his um what was that? A snow
Snow speeder.
what was the snow speeder? And
Yeah.
the attack of the snow speeders on the walkers was just exhilarating. It was incredible. And then, Luke goes to get his Jedi training in Dagobah, which was amazing. And Han and Leia go to meet up with Lando, which was a whole nother great experience. And then we reach the point where Luke fights Vader and gets his hand cut off. And I remember vividly being freaked out by that. And again, I would have been 10 years old probably, either 9 or 10, depending on what month we saw the film that year. And it freaked me out. It was an emotional response, a psychological response to a 9 or 10-year-old that really affected me. And then at the end of the film, not long after Luke loses his hand, we see him getting this robot hand. And so we assume, okay, Luke's going to be okay. But then, we see Luke and Leia and Lando go off their way. And, we're Han's in carbonite. So we don't know what's going to happen to Han. I remember the ending. I was like, you're kidding me. That's the end. That can't be the end.
Hmm.
That can't be the end. You
Yeah.
get this great pull out shot where they're looking out the window from this spacecraft. And then the shot opens up and you see this huge spaceship with this armada of other spacecraft flying away. And it's like, no, no, please don't end,
Yeah. They had
but
achieved
it
nothing. They actually lost things in this movie. And you're like,
exactly.
wait a minute, they're supposed to win. How could they be worse off than they were when they started? Just like, how can
I
you
mean,
do that though?
Han is God only knows where. Luke lost his hand. Now he's got a robot hand. I mean, come on. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah. Not only that, but now Darth Vader's his dad. Like,
Yeah,
on top
that's
of
right.
losing his
That's
hand.
the big what if, right? The big surprise. But it's another film where if it comes on, I have to sit and watch it. It's so well made. It's so well produced. It's another example of all the elements coming together and just knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
And
And
an incredible experience.
yes, and honestly, when it comes to I mean, Star Wars had the hero's story in it where the hero is the reluctant, I'm not going to go fight for the rebellion. And then, he has to when his uncle and aunt are killed. That pushes him. That's the catalyst that gets him. to go fight, and then he learns the ways of the Force within a few hours. you know,
Yeah,
and
right?
suddenly he's good enough to where he can like not only hit Womp Rats, but he can hit that little hole where the exhaust port
Right.
is on the Death Star without even using a targeting computer. So this guy is definitely a fast learner of the Force. But anyway, we get the
He's a very
hero's
fast learner.
journey in that. But so we get Joseph Campbell's mythological story structure established in the first film, very much so. So where do you go from there? So I guess the only place you can go though is down because you have this high, and apparently they're the first people in the rebellion that ever had a success because everybody in the entire rebellion gives them a big medal at the end of Star Wars.
That's right.
So as if no one had ever done anything great before. So,
Right.
but anyway,
And
Empire Strikes.
Chewie got hosed. They didn't give Chewie a medal.
Yeah, what's up with that? I mean, talk about
Not
like
fair at all.
speciesists they
Wookiee
are. Those people.
discrimination.
With all the different aliens they have, they're so speciesist, you know. But and yeah, Empire. I mean, some of it gets more serious than the first one. I mean, we don't have like these whimsical cantinas of aliens playing musical instruments anymore. Now it's just like bounty hunters, that are gonna kill them, and being inside the bellies of aliens that want to eat them that are living in asteroids, and just it's a lot of pretty dark trials for them all the way through up until you think, first of all, I didn't understand what's this carbonate thing. What did they just kill him? I mean, what is that? Okay, he's frozen. Okay, so what does that mean? It's like how could he survive being frozen like that? So
How does he
I
breathe
just
in
have,
there?
huh?
How does he breathe in there?
Yeah, it's like it was difficult to process that. It's okay. I guess he's gonna make it until they can maybe save him the next movie. So, I kind of
Right.
suspended. I had to suspend that feeling though for 3 years because it was 3 years before Jedi came out. So, at that age, it was a little bit difficult, to just wait. And you're getting them buying the magazines, and you're looking at the art they're releasing of like, yeah, here's a
Mhm.
artist rendering of Jabba the Hutt's palace or whatever, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to see that. That's still a year away before you get a chance to
Yeah.
see it. So, but yeah, I mean, the ending of that film is kind of perfect though because
Mhm.
Luke's hand being cut off and putting a mechanical arm in. It's like he's kind of becoming Darth Vader, just like that
Mhm.
dream that he has. So there again, you get into the unconscious, and Luke's unconscious is produced in that scene where he's afraid he's
Mhm.
going to become Vader, and he kind of partially does. And my God, it's his dad. So I mean, he's just going to be a chip off the old block, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
that's where the setup, it's like Jedi couldn't lose with such a great setup. But even with all those silly things they kind of threw in there with Ewoks and stuff that a lot of Star Wars fans hate and all that kind of stuff, but you can't lose with the power of that story of like the son going to his father saying, "I want to redeem you because you're the only father I'm ever gonna have. So I got to make you
Yeah.
become the great man you were supposed to be." And just that struggle. I mean,
Yeah.
every person in the world has a father or a mother or an imagined father if you don't weren't raised by them, or an imagined mother. So you have that. Um, um, that's one of the most powerful themes in storytelling is
Definitely.
the whole father son, mother daughter, and vice versa. So yeah, I mean
Mhm.
it's great. I mean I didn't put in my top 30, but in terms of if I was going to make make a spot for mythological storytelling, I mean obviously they're great. Star Wars films, the first trilogy.
Yes. Touch on John Williams again. For Empire, he came up with some incredible music for Yoda's theme, and I think he had a Leia Han themer. But just again, incredible work by John Williams.
Yes,
It's just you can't say enough about that dude.
yes. All right. So now, uh, and I think we're gonna have to wrap up on this, and we'll have to continue this discussion in the next episode. But to finish the top five and this portion of the top 30, the Terminator is my number five. And it's not
Mm,
because I'm the hugest Arnold fan in the world. I find him to be an interesting character in most films that he's in, but it's just the Terminator is like the perfect casting for Arnold because he doesn't really have to emote. He just has to be stoic. and I think that's great casting. I'm really glad he didn't end up being Michael Bean's rebel from the future who ends up, spawning the hero, the savior of the future.
Mhm,
So here again, we have a little mythological storytelling, and we have another family story of the father dreaming in the midst of the world falling apart, dreaming of meeting the mother of the savior of mankind. He dreams about her so much that he is willing to travel back in time and leave his entire future behind to be with her. And little does he know that he is the father of the savior of all mankind, which to me is one of the most brilliant story structures of film, period. It was just so ingenious that the very shot of her that he has been fixated on, almost like Christopher Reeve in Somewhere in Time, right? Is he falls in
mhm,
love with this picture of her, right? That picture, she's thinking about him when the picture's taken. Like,
mhm,
that's look how perfect that structure is in that story. That little kid in Mexico who takes the picture and hands it to her, and then she goes driving off into the unknown future, which we know what it's going to be, nuclear war. And here again, the subject of AI comes in. Like,
mhm.
even, Elon Musk is saying we're going to kill ourselves with AI. There's books out like, the first person who builds it kills us all. The sentient AI that decides our future in a microsecond, right? So, what a story, way ahead of its time, still works now. I love Terminator 2 for all of its scope and visual effects and groundbreaking everything, most expensive film ever made, all that jazz. James
Mhm.
Cameron, action, genius, you know, um, no parallel person to his capabilities. But that low budget futuristic movie that he made in '84 to me is his best movie.
Yeah, it's an incredible film, and, even though Cameron doesn't wanna take credit for Piranha 2: The Spawning, you know, um,
He was
he,
contracted for hire for that, That
Right,
was
right,
that
and,
wasn't
I can understand him not wanting to take credit for it because they canned him from it apparently. But, this came out in '84, and I think it's the first film that really got Stan Winston and his business on the map for me. Even today, the endoskeleton holds up so well. And again, we're talking pre CG time. So we're talking miniatures, we're talking practical effects, we're talking puppets. There's an interesting technique they used for walking shots of the endoskeleton, where it was a shot like from the waist up or the chest up. They had an effects guy from Stan Winston's shop basically wearing the upper body of the endoskeleton, and he would walk with it, and they would just film it. And it was, simple, practical, and in camera, and worked great, and didn't cost a lot of money. And I think the budget for Terminator was like $6 million at the time, which is, pretty low. And Cameron's bragged about how they would do some shots without permits, in parts of LA. They quickly get what they needed and move on. But you touched on the AI aspect of it. And, things are advancing so quickly. You look at these robots now, these humanoid robots they have, whether it's Tesla or Boston Dynamics or whatever company's making them. And it seems like within 3 to 6 months, we see footage of an incredible leap of what they can do. It wasn't long ago they were these four-legged dog robots, right? Then they came to two-legged bipeds with, huge backpacks, and some of them were tethered where they had to support them from above. But now they're not tethered. They resemble people, humans. They've got finger dexterity, so you could real theoretically hand this thing a weapon, like an AR-15, and this thing has the dexterity in its hand to aim and fire pull the trigger. So Cameron was not far off, and it was a frightening vision of the potential future. And the themes are more potent today than they were back in 1984.
mhm.
And it's we just don't learn from our past, I guess, do we? As humans, it's like, well, you know, let's build more nukes. Let's keep progressing AI. If they can kill us, we'll worry about it down the line.
Well, the thing is here is that this is a, learn from the past that hasn't happened before. This is a new thing. So learn from the past is apply the principle of that significant thing of the past that made it an unlevel playing field in the battle of war. Maybe it was the machine gun, like they showed in Last Samurai, when they're out there with swords, and they come in with machine guns to mow down all the samurai. So it's like there's a elevation where technology creates such an unlevel playing field that it's like, well, we're putting in 10 times more money in our military budget than any other country in the entire planet. No one's going to catch us. So we want to be the ones that have that. I mean, we can't let there be an AI. Um, what did George C. Scott say in Doctor Strangelove, that about the with the United States falls behind the Soviet Union on some
Mhm,
particular aspect of warfare? Same thing here. It's like this is really what's going on. It's like people are saying we can't be number two on this. We have to be number one on this.
mhm,
Otherwise, somebody might wipe us out. Especially if we're the most powerful country in the world. Other people say we want to take them down. So you don't want to be taken down. All the security, it has value. So um, yeah, this film really addresses that. I want to do another callback to something that predates it, that is an underseen thing, the same way that I brought up New Nightmare. I want to bring up a movie called Colossus the Forbin Project. Have you heard of it?
okay. I've not, no.
This is a film from, like, I think early 70s. I saw this on television, like, when I was a kid, and it really made an impact on me. But what it is they create this AI that's going to run our defense system. And the first thing that happens when it goes online is that it identifies that there's another system like it in the world. And it turns out it's in the Soviet Union.
Mhm,
So it wants to meet it, the way that machines do. So they set up a connection between the two, and they start learning from each other. And then they start figuring out that they might actually want to kind of pal up together on their agendas. So that we knew about this then, right? But the thing about human beings, I think that's true, is that we look at potential problems like melting of the ice caps, things like that. Those are future things that we're not there yet. So
mhm.
we'll fix that when we get there.
Yeah, we'll
So
cross
there's not
that
a
bridge
thing
when
that
we get to it, right?
right. So in order to overcome right now we have these other problems. We don't have the ability to be worried about that right now because we got to deal with these other things that are presently a problem and not theoretical, that might happen in the future.
Mhm,
Because of that, it's always last minute that we do a course correction like this. So to me, it's totally part of human psychology that's what happens. And so, and maybe the Terminator films kind of have it right. Like, maybe if a woman was in charge, who isn't impressed by guns and stuff, maybe we wouldn't,
mhm.
need to create, as Sarah has this great speech in Terminator 2, like, oh, you guys don't create children in your bodies, and if you did, you wouldn't want to create all these stupid things that you want to do. Maybe she's right. Maybe that's Cameron giving women too much credit, or maybe he's right. Maybe women would be better at it than us. I don't know, but that's another subject that I don't think we're going to be able to debate here tonight, being two dudes
Yeah.
having this
You know,
discussion.
the idea of losing control of our toys, and I use toys for lack of a better word because these are weapons we're building. I mean, I think you touched on the amount of money we spend in defense, and we're seeing certain things publicly. God only knows what's going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing. Maybe they're taking these Tesla droids and they are using them to shoot and for target practice as a replacement for humans on the battlefield. But when we lose control of our toys, it might be too late, you know, especially if they have figured out how to prevent us from turning them off or wiping their memories. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know. It's
we do know from already AI tests that as AI that it currently exists, they don't want to be turned off. We know that.
yeah. Did you hear the one experiment they did where they basically told an AI program it was going to be shut down and it uploaded itself to another cloud or another setup so it couldn't be erased?
I don't think I heard that
It was
specific
something like
one.
that.
I know that there were things that it started using strategies that were not in its original program to try to get around that possibility. I did know that that had happened, which was interesting.
Frightening.
Yeah.
Frightening.
So on that note, we'll be back to finish our top 30 in our next episode, and we'll continue to have nice little digressions into interesting subject matter that relates to the nature of psychology and its relationship to film in the next episode. So we will sign off for now, and we'll see you at the next one.